Okay guys, Timmy coming at you again here. So today what I'm going to do is, what I want is to go over the level of organization of the body. And look, for unit number 1, we went over some of the chemistry, and I get it. It's tough. I know it is, especially if you've never had chemistry before, but it is what it is. We have to go over it, and you have to have a understanding of that stuff, at least at some level. And what I'm trying to do, again, to the best of my ability, is to simplify this stuff. But again, like anything else, it requires work. So if you didn't do well on the first test, then you need to alter your plan of attack for unit test number 2. Because if you do the same thing that you did for unit 1, it's not going to end well. So you got to be on this stuff. I can't do it for you. Otherwise I would. Well, maybe, if I didn't have to golf. But I digress. So what I'm going to do now is just kind of show you basically how you got made into you. All right? So watch. We talked about the chemistry of the body, right? We talked about the stuff, those atoms, right? We talked about ionic and covalent bonds, right? We talked about the fact that if you take atoms and you start putting them together, you make molecules. So we did this, right? We took sodium and we put it together with chloride. Or we took carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen and chemically combined them together in different ways to make fats, carbs, proteins, right? Then we took those molecules and we made big molecules with them. So, for example, we took a lipid and a protein and we stuck them together, right? And we made a lipoprotein. So all we're doing here is we're taking the basic chemistry of the body and we're combining smaller things into bigger things. Now, once you understand that, again, at a basic level, then what's going to happen is we're going to take these little guys here, these macromolecules, right? These lipoproteins, these glycolipids, these phospholipids, right? And we're going to combine them into something that can actually function, and that's called an organelle. So an organelle is a specific part of a cell that performs a particular function, right? And we're going to learn about that in this unit. Now, if you take a bunch of different organelles that have each their own unique specific function, and you put them together and then you wrap it in a nice phospholipid bilayer, then you will form cells. Now, if you take a group of cells, different cells, and you put them together, you can make tissues. More on that later. So tissues are a group of different cells that come together, and if you take different tissues and you put them together in a very special way, you can form organs. Then if you take different organs, like watch, if you take the heart and the blood vessels, each one is a unique organ, you can make the cardiovascular system, right? If you take the kidneys, the bladder, and the ureters, you can make the urinary system. So an organ system is a group of organs that come together to perform a particular function. Then if you take these different organ systems, like the cardiovascular system, nervous system, right? Digestive system, you put those all together, then you form you. So basically, as you can see, we're ultimately start out as atoms. Then we take atoms and put them together to form molecules. Then you can take big molecules, right? Put those together and form really big molecules, macromolecules. And then if you take these big macromolecules, lipoproteins, glycolipids, right, phospholipids, you can form an organelle. And an organelle is inside a cell, and again, it performs a particular function. More on that later. And then you can take a bunch of organelles, wrap it up in a phospholipid bilayer, and you form cells. Then you can take cells, slap those together, and you can form tissues. All right? So again, building process, form, and function. Now, let's look at the different tissue types. So the types of tissue, and this is really what I want you to understand. Each tissue type has a particular function. All right? And Nicole's going to be going over that in a little more detail in lab. So this is what I want you to know for the lecture portion. These are the tissue types. First tissue type is epithelial tissue. And the function of epithelial tissue is to line body cavities, cover body cavities. Your skin is epithelial tissue, right? It covers your body, right? Or it lines the surface inside organs. Now, then you got muscle tissue, right? And muscle is kind of boring. Muscle can do basically two things. It can contract and relax. So muscle tissue is involved in movement, either moving fluid, right? Moving air. Those muscles move things. And in order to move, right, to contract a muscle, you need energy. And the only energy a cell can use is this stuff called ATP. More on that later. That's an abbreviation for adenosine triphosphate. More on that later. And the three types of muscular tissue that are found in the body are: number one, skeletal muscle. Number two, smooth muscle. Smooth muscle is found in a lot of different organ systems. For example, the arteries and veins of your cardiovascular system are made of smooth muscle. So smooth muscle contracts and relaxes much slower than skeletal muscle. So it contracts slowly, and it keeps that contracted form much longer, right? If we had smooth muscle in our skeletal muscle instead, it would take us a week to get out of bed, right? So you don't want that. You want to get up right away and go to gateway. Number three is cardiac muscle, and that's pretty self-explanatory, right? Cardiac is heart. Now, as we get into the different systems, I'm going to explain to you some of the subtle differences between each type of muscle. But just understand the function of muscle. The function of muscle is basically to move stuff, all right? And it contracts and relaxes. Then you have nervous tissue. I don't like talking about it. It makes me nervous. But anyways, basically what nervous tissue does is it transmits electrical impulses throughout the body to control your body. So the nervous system produces electricity through, you're not going to believe this, the use of electrolytes. right? Which we talked about. Oh yeah, we did. So electrolytes actually produce the nerve impulses, the electrical impulses. That's why if some of these electrolytes are off, the systems that you worry about are the heart, because that requires electrolytes to produce the electrical activity and make the heart contract, and the nervous system, because they both rely heavily on electrolytes. And again, the nervous system controls the minute-to-minute, second-to-second changes that occur in your body in an attempt to maintain homeostasis. Right? And nervous tissue is found in the nervous system. I'm going to write that down. Nervous tissue and the nervous system. Do-da. Okay. Anyways, finally, you have connective tissue. And connective tissue, as the name implies, connects. Are you writing that down? Do-da. And basically, connective tissue is designed for support, right? And protection. Blood is considered a connective tissue because it connects many different organs and organ systems. So again, in lab, you're going to learn about this, but what I want you to understand is that there are different types of connective tissue found in the human body, and its function is basically to provide protection and, padding and some forms of communication, like in the blood, right? Support. Now, this is what I really want you to understand. Now, look. You guys are going into healthcare. So again, what I'm trying to do is give you the stuff that you're going to need to be successful in your program. So one of the things that you're going to run into, look, if anyone walks up to you and says, hey, did you see that simple squamous epithelial slide? Wow, that's a real game changer for me. I'll give you $10,000. Right? If you're working and you have to identify this stuff. But this is what you need to understand. Watch. What you need to understand are the types of cancer based on the tissue type. So that when you read a medical report or a doctor's note, you understand what's going on. Now watch. Number one, if you get cancer of epithelial tissue, you're going to get a carcinoma. So when you read carcinoma, you know that it is either on the outer or inner side of an organ. Because what do epithelial tissue do? They line body cavities, and they also line the internal and external parts of an organ. Now, if you get a cancer of connective tissue, you have a sarcoma, right? And because there's different types of connective tissue, then you're going to have different types of more specific tumors, like an osteosarcoma. Bone is connective tissue, so you got bone cancer. Myeloma is cancer of the immune system, and really, myel means bone marrow, and you make white blood cells in your bone marrow. You got me? Then leukemia, cancer of white blood cells. Lymphoma, cancer that originates in the lymph nodes and specifically in lymphocytes. And neuroma is cancer of nervous tissue. Adenoma, cancer of glands. You got me? So the importance of understanding the different types of tissues in the body and their basic function, we got to do this. That's just part of the class. What I hope that you can gain from this is that if different tissue types develop cancer, then these are the cancers that these different tissue types end up developing. So when you see it, you can kind of get an idea as to what parts of the body are being affected. So again, tissue types, levels of organization of the body, right? Now look, we talked about, in Unit 1, we talked about some anatomical terms. We talked about chemistry, pH, all that good stuff, right? Homeostasis. So in Unit number 2, we're going to start talking about the cells. Now, no one can argue with this. Again, and I've said it a million times, and I've told myself a million times not to exaggerate. But everything happens at the level of the cell. All drugs work at the level of the cell. So if you don't have at least a good basic understanding of how cells work in the body, you're going to struggle. I mean, there's no two ways about it. It's like, I don't know, it's like explaining to someone how to drive a car and then telling them, or forget to tell them, that you have to put the key in and turn on the engine. So understanding, at least at a basic level, what happens at the cells of the body is critical. And again, these are critical parts in your education. We're going to take our time with this, but again, look, I'm going to tell myself to stop saying it, but it's going to come down to you. So I'm giving you everything you need. I'm telling you what you need to do. You have to do it. And you can't be, if you wait to the last minute, it's going to end poorly. And I don't know if some of you waited to the last minute to study for Unit 1, the Unit 1 quiz, test, whatever. But if you did, hopefully it was a learning experience, meaning that you can't wait for Unit 2. So don't do it. So you're going to see a lot of is this. Again, everything happens at the level of the cell, right? So you're going to see this a lot, where you have a cell and a capillary. And there's stuff in the blood. Who cares what stuff it is, right? And there's stuff in the cell, right? Now watch. If this little chemical X is needed by this cell, who cares what cell it is? There has to be a way for chemical X to get that get in there. That's why you need to rewatch the structure of the cell membrane, how stuff moves into and out of a cell. And then you're going to watch the video on the cell and the explanation of each organelle. You need to know that stuff. All right? So remember, the only place where the rubber meets the road, at least right now, is at the capillary in the cell. And we learned that the smallest blood vessel you got in your body is a capillary. It's 1 cell membrane thick. And a cell membrane is 1 cell membrane thick. And because they're 1 cell membrane thick, they're selectively permeable. Stuff can enter and leave, but only if it's supposed to. You got me? So that's what you need to do. So do it, please, or I'll tell.